Welcome to Healthy Brain, Happy Body, a podcast from the Northeast Region Biofeedback Society. I'm Dr. Saul Rosenthal, a health psychologist in the Boston area, and your host as we investigate the incredible connections between brain and body. Today we are continuing our discussion about creativity with Dr. Simone Lucchini, a researcher at Pennsylvania State University's Cognitive Neuroscience of Creativity Laboratory and a postdoc at the Paris Brain Institute. In the last episode, we talked about his work showing that the default mode and executive function networks couple together in the creativity process. He ran a study showing that neurofeedback can help improve the interaction between those networks, leading to higher levels of creativity. In this episode, we talk more about the implications of his study, as well as what artificial intelligence might tell us about creativity in general and in humans. Let's go beyond the data a little bit, just for fun. Does this suggest we can train people to be more creative?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our main goal here was more in basic research. So it was almost a step back. This is just to kind of like frame the study. It was more in the basic research. So can we prove that this effect exists? And for research purposes, this is good because we can back up our claims that default executive coupling is directly related to creativity. But then one might be interested in, beyond that kind of just you discovered this relationship, can we actually use this? Can we leverage this in applied settings? So I don't know, people are trying to be creative at work, or their profession or their hobby. And can we help them be more creative in a sense? That I think is a very interesting question. But I do think it becomes quite complicated. Because ours was obviously a very controlled environment and it was obviously a very simplistic task. So in real life creativity, the task is obviously quite more complicated. You might be sitting in your studio. Let's take the visual artist for an example. You might be sitting in your studio and you're surrounded with all this paint, and we don't really know the time of the day that you're doing everything. Your clock might not be following like a normal rhythm. The task is quite tricky in the sense that it's not simply generating unusual uses, but it requires you to have this technical expertise behind it. So there's all these added layers that I think need to be accounted for. And what I mean by that is, science happens in steps. And so here the next step would be, can we increase the level of complexity just a tiny bit? And do we see an extension to this next level of complexity of the effect that we already observed? And if yes, then, that's great. What's the next step from there? And I do think eventually we could get to the point that I don't see the reason why not. I think at a certain point we could get to a point where like you could essentially buy one of these products, say from whichever company decides to invest in this, buy one of these products. I think there are companies that already do this, to be honest. An FNIRS cap or an EG cap, and it might be pre-set up to this creativity coupling, and it selects the brain regions. And by doing maybe a little task where you focus on the screen and you follow whatever instructions it gives you, you're able to increase this kind of brain activity or connectivity that leads you to then be more creative. Yes. So I would say yes. Very complicated.
Oh, incredible. Well, what would be the next step after your study? What's your next study going to be, if you could, you have the freedom to design it?
So we were actually working on some extensions to this. We are trying to essentially to kind of what I was hinting at, extend it to other tasks. We've seen this in the alternate uses task. The alternate uses task is this what we call domain general task because it doesn't really require any kind of specific expertise. Obviously, if you have expertise in the object that I try to generate uses for, but that is quite rare in general. So we're trying to extend it to different tasks that are more domain specific, say scientific creativity or say something more like artistic creativity. And do we see that, I don't know, maybe a violinist that is improvising, do they see a benefit from this kind of neurofeedback. Does it extend to 24 hours later? And then you could also try and push the boundaries and see like, okay, does it extend to a week later? What point do you need to repeat the neurofeedback because the effects are lingering off? These kind of like questions that you could ask.
So, you said you were interested in the arts. Was that music that you were
Yeah, I
interested
love
in?
music, but I love every kind of art, to be honest.
Okay, so because a lot of this work seems to be done with music.
Mhm.
Interestingly, I'm not sure what that means, but what say you wanted to focus on a domain specific away from the general, and let's say you wanted to focus on music. What would be a how would you study this? How would
Mhm.
you study this with a musician to see whether or not the neurofeedback might boost their creativity?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I think in the past, most neurofeedback and musical creativity studies, sorry, not neurofeedback, neuroscience and musical creativity studies have looked at improvising musicians. And the main reason for this is that improvisation is undeniably a form of creativity, and it requires you because it requires you to create in the moment. We could go back and forth, and we could argue about the extent to which interpretation of a pre-written piece is also creative. But I think improvisation does give more like solid grounds for like the presence of creativity there. Um, so what you would do is you would get, say, for example, a jazz musician, and you could bring them into the lab, and you could ask them to improvise for you. You could give them some sort of boundaries within which to play their music. You wouldn't just let them free roam improvise, but you would give them, say, play between this note and this note on the piano and improvise to this maybe like rhythm. And you see what they generate for you. Then you would do the neurofeedback in the same way, really, that we did it in our study. Or you could think of modifying it if you have good reason to think that like maybe different brain regions are more relevant for musical creativity as opposed to domain general, which is certainly the case. It's not one-to-one mapping. And then similarly to how we did it, you would ask the individual, okay, go home, have a rest, take a sleep, then come back the next day and do the same thing again, improvise for us on a similar piece. And then what you would see is, did they get more creative from day one to day two? And on average, do these people who received the real neurofeedback get more creative than the people who did not receive this real neurofeedback?
Yeah, I can imagine you can create an alternate uses task that uses improvisation. So you
Yeah.
sort of lay out some parameter and say, okay, how many, you know, 1 minute, 30-second pieces can you come up with that improvise off of this theme?
That would be super
And
fun.
see.
I like that
It'll be,
because that requires like that is some really complicated kind of almost creativity where like it requires you
you know,
to really like sit down and generate pieces. And I do think that there is room for, I think, to be technical about music. Like improvisation is almost that, but it's to an extent it's not, because it's like, I could give you like a song that already exists, um, just any like backtrack from like, I don't know, Bob Dylan or whoever, and you could improvise on that. And to an
mhm.
extent, the what you would generate is creative, to this in the sense that you are not just playing the song by memory, and in that sense we would probably call that creativity. um, Now is that, and then like obviously it gets into the murkiness of like how creative is it, and is it different from like the creativity of actually creating a finished piece and like having the lyrics, having the, say, if you want to add the voice to it, having all the structure that comes into play when
Get
you're
very complicated very quickly.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But I love it. That's why I love creativity.
Yeah.
It's a truly, I think, wonderful function that humans have that makes us unique, especially in the world of AI now. We
Well,
really need it.
yeah. Well, I was going to actually ask you about that because you've done some AI
Mhm.
work.
Yes,
So
yes.
why don't we shift over to that? You've given us a great reason to do that. Um, well, good segue. Is AI creative?
Great question. A lot of people would say no. A lot of like great researchers in my field would say no. I would stand on the side of I actually think yes, but it depends
Hmm.
again by what you mean. Uh,
Definition.
yeah,
Yeah.
by definition, like if you mean the product, can it generate original and appropriate uses? Yeah, obviously it can. Um, is it creative in the real sense of creativity? It's in like it transforms a field? Probably not. So, certainly, I haven't seen good evidence as to that quite yet. But it certainly has the capacity. Like, if you ask, does the technology have the capacity to be creative in the future, even in this more transformative sense? I would say, yeah. There is nothing like inherent about software that would not be allowed to be creative, unless, yeah, no, I would stop there. There is.
I think we'll have to figure out what the definition of creativity is.
I think
Um,
I think I would say like there's a lot of back and forth there, but I do think like at least for research purposes we do have a pretty like clear definition. Well, I
mhm.
do not want people to go away think that there is no definition. We do have, and it's pretty agreed
Sure.
on. Then again, I do think that because we're psychologists, so we in the same way that like intelligence you could argue, well, but this could also be important for intelligence, this could also be important, and I said there's room for those kind of discussions, but to an extent like the core is agreed upon, and then you can
Right.
argue about the extra components that you could add in there and where do they fit, and I think that's certainly interesting too.
Well, do you think AI can help us humans be more creative?
Yeah, no, I think definitely. I think that's more so the what I'm more excited about, and more so what I think it is useful for right now. I really don't think that AI can single-handedly be creative in this very moment, and that be really useful in the real world. But definitely, collaborative creativity has a space to grow and has a space to exist within the current world, and I think it already does. Um, so yeah, I conducted some studies on this, and again, we try and make them a bit more simplistic when we conduct them in the lab. We might ask individuals to write a short story, write it together with the AI, or write it on their own, or write it with the use of the internet, or with the use of another partner, a human partner, as a collaborator. And we could try and compare all these conditions and see, like, okay, what is the impact of working with AI as opposed to all these other tools that you could use, or maybe working on your own as well. And yeah, it does help a lot of the time. There are
Well, it's interesting
benefits.
because I mean there are lots of arguments that AI in particular, but I think in general, sort of high tech use has actually can diminish creativity, and yet you can see lots of ways that it can improve creativity. I mean, when I look at the students I work with and the younger people, the tools they have, I mean, we couldn't have dreamed of these things
Yeah,
20 years ago,
no, I can
30
imagine.
years ago, or whenever I was a student, which was a while ago. So the it seems like the possibilities of creativity are hugely improved,
Hmm.
and yet there's also the concern that it's actually dampening creativity. So we have to, I guess,
Yeah,
find our way through.
I think what maybe you're hinting at, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's almost like this difference between like fostering creativity, so for example in students, and the development of creativity through life, and then the actual maybe like yeah, when you're actually working as an adult professional, um, and now you're just not so much caring about development anymore, even though you probably should, but you're
Mm-hmm.
really focusing more so on the product, and can I generate a better product, a more creative product now with AI. And I do think there is not enough research on the fostering side. 100% will stand that on this ground, that we need a lot more research to actually see the developmental effects of AI use, and certainly in other cases as well, on other factors, but creativity certainly as one of them. Like, if I grow up using AI, every time that I'm being creative, I use AI, or at least I have available AI and might turn to it. Does that then impact how creative I will be growing up, and the ways that I'll be creative? Like, does that impact my creativity? I don't think there's enough work on this kind of research, developmental research. It's obviously complicated research to run, it's because it tend to require longitudinal studies and more complicated models. Um, But I think that there's certainly room for concern in that sense. Um, at least because I don't know the answer to it. But as it like as it relates to then being creative in the moment, if I ask you now, be creative and write a short story saying I give you the AI, that could generally help. Um, but yeah, again, contextual, depends on the task maybe, and depends how much you're an expert in the task already. If you're an expert musician, if I give you an AI, you might just be like, nah, I'll do better on my own. Thank you very much.
Exactly.
But so again, like it depends really.
Well, I think the challenge with studying this is the technology is changing too quickly.
Mhm.
So we can't really do the developmental studies. The
Yeah.
technology that you're using now is going to be very different than your next generation of graduate students and young newly minted doctorates in 5 years. So it's really hard to do that developmental research,
Yeah, that's a very good point.
but
It's
necessary
yeah.
as well. Yeah.
No, I agree. It's a good caveat. It's like whatever study we conduct now will have to be kind of updated as AI develops. I will say there is a certain commonality that we're seeing with AI tools and how like you can think of them as almost like information retrieval tools that
Mm-hmm.
initially you would go early days you would talk to someone for information, then maybe you would go to the library once we invented like libraries. Then you would go to the internet. Eventually you manage to like retrieve information that way, and now a lot of people are just using AI. They're not even accessing Google anymore. If they go on Google, they just look at the little summary, AI summary at the top there. They don't even access any pages in there, looking at the original article
Right.
and so forth. And that I think will sort of remain. That I think is something of a constant with the AI technology. The way that it might be visualized, I think, will change. But it seems to be a constant that now, okay, this is an information retrieval tool, and people seem to use it for the purpose, and they do seem to, in a lot of cases, prefer to the more almost truthful, looking at the original article. And I think at least that should certainly be studied because it does. I don't know. People hated the internet when it came out. They said that it will destroy the brains of everyone, and
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
I don't think it did, but not all technologies are equal. So
This is true. That's true. Well, Simone, thank you so much for joining us here. And if people are interested in your work, where can they find you?
yeah, that's a
If you want to be found, that is.
yeah. No, we researchers, we need more attention, and I actually
That's true.
really
Yeah.
appreciate you inviting me here and giving us a space to 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 discuss what we do and the work that we do. So I have a website which is my name and my surname.com, simoneluchini.com. Um, you can also find me on Google Scholar, and there you would find all the articles that I do on my website. I try and give little summaries of the studies I've conducted, but you can also get links to the articles themselves. Um, and yeah, you can certainly read more into creativity through my work. There's also many great researchers that I'm building all my work on their shoulders, and they certainly, I can't list all of them now, but they certainly deserve the recognition um, of their work as well.
Well, thanks again, and good luck in Paris.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me again.
You are listening to Healthy Brain, Happy Body. I'm your host, Dr. Saul Rosenthal. Our guest today was Dr. Simone Lucchini. Find out more about him and his work in the show notes or at simoneluchini.com. Subscribe to this podcast by clicking the subscribe here link or wherever you get your podcasts. If you enjoy Healthy Brain, Happy Body, please rate us and leave reviews at Apple Podcast or wherever you listen. Reviews help us get more listeners, and that's more people who can learn about and benefit from biofeedback, neurofeedback, and other mind-body approaches to health. Also, let us know what you think by sending us email. Our address is healthybrain@nrbs.org. Healthy Brain, Happy Body is produced and edited by me. The theme music is Catch It by Coma Media. It is a production of the Northeast Region Biofeedback Society. Go to nrbs.org to find out more about the organization, including our trainings, monthly webinars, and yearly conference. All opinions expressed are those of our guests and not the NRBS. This podcast is not meant to replace advice from qualified healthcare providers. Healthy Brain, Happy Body is supported by the sponsors of NRBS and by the International Society for Neuroregulation and Research. Be sure to join us on our next episode as we continue to explore the keys to our well-being on Healthy Brain, Happy Body.